I used to believe that my autism defined me. To be sure, it's a major factor shaping who I am, but I no longer think it's the main factor, much less the only factor. I've seen many people argue against autism being cured, saying that if they were no longer autistic, they would no longer be themselves, that curing them would be the equivalent of killing them and replacing them with someone else. And I did in the past think along those lines, though I thought I was such a bad person I deserved to be replaced. But I no longer think that way, and hope I could allay others' fears of treatments for autism, which will hopefully come about in the future, by reminding everyone of just how many other things go into who we are. For one, our personalities differ. Autism affects personality. It correlates with the various traits that make up personality. Currently, the best model of personality suggests that there are 5 dimensions on which people vary, and autism has a strong impact on a couple of them, but it's not an overwhelming impact. Many other genetic and environmental factors influence even these personality dimensions, and we have other dimensions which are less influenced by autism. Obviously, autistic people tend to be more introverted. They also tend to be more fearful, less neurotic, and less conscientious, which is a bit harder to explain. But the traits of agreeableness and openness to new experience don't seem to be as affected by autism as the other traits. And even the most affected trait isn't, like, introversion isn't massively affected to the point that extroverted autistic people don't exist. There are extroverted autistic people. They're rarer than the general population, but they do exist. And these personality factors they're fed into by autism, but also by many other things, and they feed into outcomes such as poor punctuality, bad personal hygiene, and a lack of self-control, which are caused in large part by low conscientiousness. The personality traits basically integrate lots of different factors about you and predict certain outcomes. That's what they're good for. And neuroticism predicts phobias and social anxiety. So autistic people differ a lot, and I used to think this was due to just how much autism varies. Autistic people can be very severe in one symptom, but not so severe in other symptoms. For example, you can have very bad language, but okay social skills, or vice versa. And I thought that different forms of autism were the main reason for the variability between autistic people. But other factors which are important predictors of outcomes of autism that vary within the general population due to other things that make us vary, our environment and genes, to speak really broadly, that those other factors vary between people, and all those other things that cause normal people, for want of a better word, to vary, are still present in autistic people. So autism is a major factor, pushing people in one direction, but all these other factors can push you with less force, but there's a lot more of these other factors, and they can push you in another direction, or they can push you in the same direction as autism, or they could just not push you at all, depending on what genes and what environment you've got. So personality is one thing that influences outcomes. Autism itself can just directly cause some outcomes, though. If your autism affects something unrelated to personality, it can directly cause bad outcomes. And it can act through other mediating variables, such as intelligence, which is in some cases decreased by autism. Or physical health. Autism, depending on the type, some of the genetic causes of autism also cause cancer early in life. Others cause problems with going to the toilet, and combined with poor social skills, that could really lead to poor outcomes. So there's these comorbidities like ADHD, which can also go with autism, and that could be a mediating variable. Other factors can influence your likelihood of getting ADHD, but genes that cause autism may also increase that risk. So the causes of autism could also cause other conditions, which may lead to the same outcomes that autism leads to, just for a different route. So all this could help explain why autistic people are so diverse, and if you got rid of your autism, it probably wouldn't change who you are that much, for better or worse. Our genes cannot be changed by the environment, at least not a normal environment. Maybe if we get some gene therapy they could be, but the way you behave due to your autism is not going to feed back and alter your genes. However, your environment is in large part caused by the outcomes of your actions. If you're going around smelly because you don't clean, and you have a phobia of going out, so you're not even leaving the house, you're just sitting around smelling, that's going to change what environment you're experiencing. Or, for another example, if you're super introverted and you don't talk to anyone, then you're not going to have the kinds of social experiences that will help you develop social skills. So the environmental factors that lead to outcomes can themselves, and that influence personality and other mediating variables, can themselves be influenced by outcomes that are influenced by autism. So it's a fairly complicated picture, with autism being influenced by genes and environment, and there being many types of autism. But genes and environment also influence lots of other factors, which influence our outcomes, which feed back on the environment. And I guess what genes are turned on and off is determined by the environment, so even the genes are kind of influenced by the outcomes of our environment. If you're really stressed, that alters your environment, and that can turn on genes which might have previously might not have been turned on if you didn't get super stressed all the time, and that could lead to diseases which can feed back to change your outcomes even more. So autism, even though it is a huge factor in who an autistic person is not the whole of who you are, and you wouldn't totally be, like, you would probably be slightly different without it, for better or worse, but it wouldn't totally change who you are, and many things change who you are a little bit. Every time you read a book or learn something, learn a new skill, make new friends, like travel abroad, that's changing you a little bit. That doesn't kill you and replace you with someone new. So if you're okay with changing a little bit, I know autistic people can be opposed to change, but if you are okay with changing a little bit, which most of us are, then the slightly more than little bit that removing autism would change you should be okay. Yeah, it's a fairly big change, but there are fairly big changes that we go out of our way to have, like getting an education or trying to get fit if we're fat. Those are big changes that alter us, and we're okay with those, so I guess we should be okay with treating autism too. Is not gonna, like, removing this one node from this graph, if we remove the autism thing, we still have, like, I'm actually removing the autism here, we still have all the rest of this graph, which is still gonna make you who you are. You've removed a major factor, but you haven't removed everything from this by any means.